There is now a growing movement, perhaps only 10 years old, that is looking at dialogical models and asking what some of those dialogical models might mean. So if we have a dialogical model, there are certain things we need to have as foundations before we can dialogue. So some people would say one level of dialogue is an exchange of information. Right? This is what Catholics believe, this is what Muslims believe. We would call it a basic level of religious literacy, but it isn't true dialogue because it's just an exchange of information. Others would say you need an accumulation of facts about religion before you can engage in that dialogue. Now, these things are some of the things that you're doing at school. You know, you have basic information, you have an accumulation of facts, but if you want true learning to happen, it has to move beyond that. So then in the dialogical models, they also talk about how you need to learn from religion. And what is it that learning from religion can impact? So in fact, if I belong to the Christian tradition and I know what Christian meditation is about because I have participated in meditation practices, when I'm learning about Buddhism and learning about meditation in Buddhism, there is something there that makes sense because I've had an experience of it myself. Right? And then maybe even because I might have even participated in some form of meditation, there may be something in Buddhist meditation that assists my meditation within the Christian tradition. So that's a bit about the learning from. It's also, in some religious writers talk about it as religious envy. And maybe one of the best examples I can use for religious envy was at one stage, I had a group of students who were learning about Passover and how Shabbat, everything stops. You know, you do your preparation, you have your rest day, you have this festive meal, you spend time with the family. And even if you're in Israel on Shabbat days now, you will see kids in the foyers of hotels not playing computer games, but playing with each other or playing a board game, nothing mechanical. And it seems to be a real focus on how do people relate to each other on this day. So a friend of mine who had experienced Shabbat in that kind of tradition said, I really understand what holy or religious envy is about, because I would like to have that time in my religious calendar to spend with my family and to have a religious focus on it that then moves beyond. So you see what I mean by religious envy? That there's something there and you're kind of learning from it as well. But you're not at the point of saying, I'm going to give up what I have and go there. It's a mutual kind of understanding. Then we can also move. Some people in the dialogical understandings have a serious engagement with religious texts, and it's a particular focus on a religious engagement with texts. And they also then move to questions of doctrine and practice. Now there's a but within all of that. All of those are good, but it presupposes, from a dialogical understanding, it presupposes that there's an identification with a particular religious tradition. So what dialogical models are saying is, you can't do this from a neutral perspective because you have to have some engagement with the religious tradition in order to get to that deep understanding of what some element of that might be in another religious tradition. And I think this is the big shift in how we might learn about and from religious traditions. It's a big move from phenomenology that says, divorce yourself from this, look at this in a scientific method and describe it, because you never really got the empathy part of that, of, you know, what was the motive. You could give great descriptions of it, of what you saw, but, you know, you weren't really learning from it in any sense. So Catherine Cornell, who is at Boston College, writes in this area significantly. It is just a new area coming forward, and it's called comparative theology. Now again, we have the word comparative there, so please do not interpret this comparative theology in the way that comparative religion happened 150 and 200 years ago. So the comparative theology is saying that the explorers, if you like, are grounded in a religious tradition. And this is where I think we can see quite a shift in how we can marry and operate within studies of religion, the RE curriculum, and religion and ethics. So here's some stuff about comparative theology. The person reaches out from their own faith tradition, right? That they have a strong sense of who and what they are. And this is not unusual in the area of interreligious dialogue either. People are saying now that you can only really engage in interreligious dialogue if you know something of a religious tradition and are grounded in it yourself. So, from their own faith tradition, in order to intentionally and sympathetically interact and exchange with other systems of theological belief in a comparative way. Now, the comparative way is not we have this and they have something else, right? Or we have this and they don't have this, right? It's not that kind of comparison. Comparative theology opens up the possibility for a richer appreciation of self. Right? So in learning about the other, what do I learn from that and what do I learn about myself within the journey of this religious tradition? Comparative theology does not see key differences in religious tradition. It acknowledges difference, right? But it does not see key differences in religious belief and practice as something to be forced into a theory, right? Rather, it sees them as unique examples of living theology. In the past, when we've used comparative, we've kind of used us as the norm and the others as being quite different, and it gets forced into a particular way of viewing. Right? Comparative theology is saying it's unique and it's a living form of theology. How do we engage with it, and what might challenge us in our religious tradition to think about our tradition differently. Right? And it also brings into that element of how do we fit, as Diane Eck would say, as a restless critic within our own tradition, and keep thinking about how we live that out as well. Some of the conditions then Catherine Keneal talks about in comparative theology. The first thing she says, we have to have a doctrinal humility. So if we go into comparative theology saying we've got it all right and they've got it all wrong, we're not doing comparative theology. Right? So there is a doctrinal humility saying that the home religious tradition is there. It has really strong strengths in how it presents its material, but we might be able to learn from others some elements about our own tradition and how we interpret it. Commitment to a particular tradition, that people need to be grounded in a tradition. Catherine Keneal talks a lot about there are lots of seekers and not many dwellers. And she says in this world of people searching, and particularly in the new age kind of view of religion, that you will never engage at any depth if you're always a seeker rather than a dweller. So she said true dialogue comes from knowing who and what you are and really being able to critique who and what you are in your tradition as well. It's not saying everything is wrong with it, but it's saying we're doing the best we can, but how can we improve it within that tradition? Interconnection is another, what she sees as an essential condition. So sometimes the interconnection might be that the religious other and you engage in an issue of social concern. Right? So that interconnection could be quite significant. And empathy is important. We have to know what the religious tradition means for the insider and what it might be like. she uses a fantastic example of how she has studied Hinduism all her life. She is a Catholic, has come out of Leuven University in Belgium, but she has studied Hinduism. And she said she was in a temple for Ganesh in India, and she knew everything about what was there. She was feeling quite comfortable. And then she saw a woman making an offering to Ganesh and being truly engaged in that process of the ritual. And she said it struck her for the very first time. She understood why that woman was doing it. She knew the motivation for it. She could see her faith within that, but it was not for her, right? That, you know, and that empathy, and she learnt about ritual practice from that and how that was engaged, but she knew that there was a significant difference in that woman and herself because of her own religious belonging in a tradition. These dialogical models come out of hermeneutical communicative models. How do we continually engage and critique in what we learn? So communicative models of education respect where the learner is. Now this is a foundation for inquiry learning, too. So they respect where the learner is and they promote critical thinking. In fact, Didier Polyphant says the start and end point of religious education for students is that they learn to take a personal, critical and well-informed position, and again see critical as an interpreted position. Right? So that they can arrive at their own well-considered conclusion with respect to belief and learning. And ideally, that's what the study of religion syllabus is about. That's what the diocesan RE curriculum is about, and that's what religion and ethics is about. What we have to do is how do we work with students to get to that point? And how do we expose them in a way to engage with the tradition? So I thought I'd just give you that kind of shift. And the sands are moving even now, very strongly in the studies of religion programs overseas. There is, has been for a long time, a shift away from phenomenology. I'm not sure that we've started the move here, but we haven't quite gone completely away from it. But there is also this growing movement of comparative theology, which it emphasises what it is that you know about your home tradition. And numbers-wise, we would know that religion studies departments in universities worldwide are declining dramatically, particularly the ones that are promoting a distance view of religion. Right? So that phenomenological basis to how you study religion. The universities that have growing numbers are the ones that are picking up on this comparative theology thing. And Boston College would say that where you have just a unit on one religious tradition, it doesn't really get the student numbers. But when you have Christianity and Hinduism, for example, students are joining those classes in very large numbers. And as Catherine Cornell would say, they are all saying we are learning much more about Christianity as we engage in this, as we are learning about Hinduism. Right? So I think it's saying something to us, I believe, about what aspects of this might we be able to draw down into religious education at an appropriate level.